Hi everyone. Today I'd like to share my breastfeeding journey. And just as a kind of disclaimer from the beginning, breastfeeding was something that was incredibly important to me, but I do realize that some women either can't or choose not to breastfeed, and I think that's perfectly fine. I think everyone needs to do what's best for them and what's best for their baby, so please just don't think this video is in any way meant to shame anyone that isn't breastfeeding. It was simply something that was really, really important to me, and you'll see it wasn't something that necessarily came easy, and I kind of had to go through a bit in order to be successful at breastfeeding. So for those of you who are struggling breastfeeding, hopefully this video will give you a bit of encouragement to find a way to, make it happen, make it possible for you to breastfeed. And if it doesn't work, then just know that's okay too. So, my breastfeeding journey. My daughter was born on October 10th in the early morning hours at 3:37, and she pretty much latched right away, and I was so happy. I mean, as I said, breastfeeding was just something that I was so passionate about. I really felt like this would be something that would be a really important bonding experience for me and her, and I felt really close with her when she did latch. So I was really happy. In the hospital there were nurses and they were helping me, kind of showing me how to breastfeed. And I have a bit of a clip here where you can see kind of one of my first it was actually the very first time I think that I was breastfeeding. So I'll roll that now.
For help in there, perfect. See if you can just sneak that thumb up a little bit. Oh, there, right?
So while I'm in the hospital, I had the help of the nurse, and I made sure to kind of take advantage of that. I would ring and I would ask for help. Now there was one nurse that I thought wasn't particularly helpful. She'd come, Clara was interested in breastfeeding. She was quite enthusiastic about it. So she'd latch, she'd drink, and the nurse would she would just kind of take my boob, shove it into her mouth, and like, oh, she's drinking, and leave the room. So that wasn't really helpful because I kind of wanted to learn a little bit more about the hold and how to properly support her while breastfeeding. Another nurse was great at that. She would show me the cradle hold, she would show me the football hold. She kind of taught me a little bit about what her mouth should look like when she's actually feeding, so like the chewing motion and everything. So that was really helpful. And despite all of that help, by that evening, so the evening of the day that she was born, my nipples were sore. Like it was starting to become quite uncomfortable. So I'd ring more often to try and get help. And again, that one nurse was really helpful. She'd kind of stay with me, make sure that Clara would stay on, while the other nurse would pop her on and run out, and then Clara would unlatch, and I'd be sitting there right where I started. And this is my very first day with a newborn. I'm a first-time mom, and I would have liked a little more support. And again, just when you're in the hospital, make sure you request that support. So when that nurse would leave, I would ring again and ask for the other nurse, and I encourage you to do the same. So next morning we were released from the hospital, and the first few times nursing at home did not go well. By the time that evening came around, I was crying really, really hard. And I'm not sure if you've ever heard the same thing being told to you, but they told me, nursing, it's okay if it's a little uncomfortable in the beginning, but you shouldn't have to curl your toes in pain. Well, I was curling my toes. It was bad. So I was bawling, but I was determined. So Tim was actually sitting with me in the nursery, and he was looking up techniques to how to hold Clara differently and maybe see if that would help. So we tried a few things. It didn't go well. The latching itself was the most painful. Once she was on, it was uncomfortable and not nice, but the latching was really what got me scared. So at that point, I was supposed to feed every 2 hours, and that was really daunting because I was in pain. My nipples were cracking at this point. I had blood blisters forming, and I mean, it wasn't pretty. But the night somehow was a little easier. It was still really painful. Every time I had to latch her, I would have to squeeze my eyes. I would be afraid of doing it, but the nursing was okay. Now, at the time I was nursing the way that I was told to in the hospital. So that means they told me a minimum of 10 minutes and then switch her to the other breast. Now I would keep her on one breast longer because I would be so happy that she was actually drinking. And in hindsight, I'm glad I did, because I think that was actually the better thing to do. But then I would actually take my little pinky, I would slide it in her mouth next to my nipple, break the suction, like unlatch her, and then switch her to the other side and kind of continue there for another 10 minutes or so. And so we made it through the night. The next morning, my boobs were getting really hot. They were kind of getting hard. And it seemed like I was thinking, okay, my milk is probably coming in. I had actually called the local health unit. They offer breastfeeding support, and I had requested that a nurse would come to my house that day, because, you know, nursing is not supposed to be that painful, and it was really bad. So I wanted to get all the help I could, because I really wanted breastfeeding to work. And I'm fortunate that I have that kind of support system in my local community. So at 1 p.m. that day, a nurse came, and she was lovely. She essentially, she said, please just do whatever you've been doing so far. Let me watch, and then I'll like give you feedback and help you. So I did that. I latched Clara. She saw I was in pain, but she said, you know what? Your hold is actually not bad, and her latch is, you know, she's looking enthusiastic, like she's willing to nurse. So she showed me a few things to improve my hold, which was really great. So she kind of showed me how Clara's nose was supposed to have a bit more distance from my boob. She showed me which areas of my nipple were supposed to kind of disappear in her mouth and all of that. And it's just kind of, it gives you some guidelines to look out for, and it helped me kind of have something to focus on too. So that was really good. She also then noticed, though, that it's possible that Clara has a lip tie, which essentially means that the little band underneath her tongue was too short to allow her tongue to properly like cradle my boob and press out the milk. Because of the possibility that she may have a lip tie, the nurse actually recommended that Tim and I would bring Clara into the nursing clinic on the following Monday. So this was on a Friday. She said after the weekend on Mondays, in our local health unit, they essentially have like an open clinic where you can go for breastfeeding support. So she suggested we come there because there's some nurses there with a lot of experience in like diagnosing lip and tongue ties. So after that visit, I felt encouraged. I thought I'd gotten a good amount of help with my hold. I was feeling happy that, you know, she said, you know, she is drinking okay at this point. Like she's clearly drinking, she's swallowing and all that. So that was reassuring. So that kind of, knowing that and knowing that on Monday I would get more help, we made it through the weekend essentially. And my milk had come in. So on the weekend, my boobs started kind of leaking. So it was a weird experience, but I was just so happy that breastfeeding was, you know, kind of happening. Not to say that I wasn't in pain. I was certainly in a decent amount of pain at the time. And honestly, I was not wearing anything from like my belly button up. My boobs were too painful to like have anything on them. They were so sensitive. And hello, Anastasia. So Monday comes around and we bring Clara to the nursing clinic. Same procedure. They asked me, hey, why don't you sit down and nurse her and show us what you've been doing. So this was a different nurse now. And they had a file on me now. They knew what kind of like my concerns were. And she looked and she's like, you know what? Your hold is really good. And her latch actually looks pretty good. Again, she like corrected minor things, but she said, you know, it looks good. So what they did is they also weighed her. And Clara was below her birth weight still. Now, this is not ideal. Obviously, after they are born, they sink below their birth weight, but they're supposed to kind of catch up fairly quickly. Within a week, they're supposed to be, you know, at least back at their birth weight. Now, Clara had dropped quite a bit underneath, so, you know, they said, well, she needs to get a little more food into her. At the same time, over the weekend, we noticed that she was getting a little more jaundiced, so she was kind of getting a little more yellow. And I had said to the nurse, like, look, can you check, like, is she jaundiced? Is this something we need to be concerned about? And that coupled with the continued weight loss, they said, you know what, it's probably best if you top her off. Now, we chose to top her off with breast milk, which meant that the health unit actually lent me a breast pump. It was a Medela, kind of one of the old ones, Symphony, I think, Symphony breast pump. And so they showed me how to pump, and then we take 20 millimeters of breast milk, and Tim actually took Clara, and he would feed her after I'd nursed her.
There you go. Sit her right up.
So we started doing that day, and we ended up only having to do it for 3 days, fortunately. But we were going to top her off after each feed. So I would breastfeed for about 20 minutes, and then I would pump while Tim would feed her with a syringe. I had to do a quick diaper change there, but anyway, so on top of the topping her off with breast milk, of course we had her checked out for her lip tie. So there were 3 nurses, and they all agreed not only did she have a tongue tie, but also a lip tie, and they said it actually looked quite severe. So what they did was actually they called dentists for us immediately that are specialized in children and doing these procedures of lip and tongue ties. And they managed to get an appointment for us on Wednesday, so 2 days later. Now, because of the jaundice, they recommended we go in and see our family doctor right away to get Clara's bilirubin levels tested as well. So we actually went in to the family doctor, and ironically we had our appointment the next day, but you know, first time parents, we wanted to go in that day. My family doctor was not in at that time, so they actually had us see one of the other doctors in the clinic, and that doctor said, you know, she wasn't so sure that Clara had a lip and tongue tie, and we should cancel that surgery and wait until we get consulted with our family doctor, which, you know, it made me feel really discouraged, because the nurses had taken a lot of time to look at, you know, the way Clara was nursing and everything, and they had made a good case for it, and it kind of also meant that there was something that could be fixed, and then I would be able to successfully breastfeed. So then the doctor also sent us to get bilirubin levels tested, and that's a whole other story, because she actually didn't manage to get us the proper requisition form. She did not manage to get us in to get blood tests done, which was just very ridiculous. Like a doctor who can't, can get us the tests that we needed for my daughter, and something that's really common like jaundice. Anyway, other stories. Let's just say I wasn't very happy with that doctor. I left that office feeling really uneasy about the things that she'd said and about getting all these tests done that we needed, right? So sure enough, we wanted to go to the hospital where the lab is for those tests, and they couldn't do it with the forms that this doctor had given us. So I ended up calling the pediatrician that had cleared and released Clara from the hospital the week prior. And I called them and I said, you know what, like, she's jaundiced, this doctor has said she's jaundiced, the nurse have said they're jaundiced, but somehow we can't get in to get her bilirubin levels tested. Is there a way we can come and see you? And they were lovely. They had us come in on Tuesday, so right the following day. And we got her levels tested. They were elevated, but not something to be concerned about, so she didn't have to go under the lights. And this pediatrician then said, you know what, keep the surgery appointment, not the surgery, but keep the appointment with the dentist and get a consultation, because they're the expert. They will actually be able to really tell you if Clara has the lip and tongue tie and whether a surgery is necessary. And we had held off with canceling the appointment because, as I said, I hadn't been feeling good about what that doctor had said, so we kept it just in case and decided we'd ask the pediatrician, who seemed like maybe the better place to get an expert opinion. So she said, keep the appointment. So we did. We went there the following day. During the consultation, the dentist took so much time explaining things to us, and he said there are 4 different degrees of severity when it comes to lip and tongue ties. And he says Clara was 4, so the worst on each of them. And he basically left us the option, do you want to kind of think about it? Do you want to consult with someone else? or would you like to do the procedure of essentially severing these little bands to make sure that she has the flexibility in her mouth and with her tongue to properly latch. Now, we decided to do the procedure right then and there. We felt really confident about it. Both the nurses, the pediatrician and the dentist had made a really good case for it. And I felt optimistic that that would really help her be able to get the nutrition that she needed. So we had that procedure done that day. It was the hardest day ever. I chose to hold her during the procedure. They left us the option of leaving the room. I said, hell no, I want to stay with my baby. So I actually was in a dentist chair and I was holding her on top of me, and I have a picture of that here actually. So I was holding her, and the dentist did the lip tie procedure, and it was really quick. I mean, it wasn't great, but it went quick. And then he had to do the tongue tie procedure, and he had already warned us that her tongue tie was, I guess, in a bad place, like in terms of like where the blood vessels were and stuff. So he had Tim hold her legs down while I was holding her arms, and there was not a nurse, but what is it? Like a dental assistant, I suppose, who would also help hold her steady. And he ended up actually getting one of the blood vessels, unfortunately, so she was bleeding quite a bit at first, which, I mean, luckily I was holding her and she was on top of me, so I couldn't really see it, but Tim, who's holding her feet, saw it all, and let's just say his face said it all, and it did not make me feel good. But it stopped bleeding in no time. They just put pressure on it. It was done. And right after the procedure, they actually had me breastfeed her, and they're like, some people notice the difference right away. Now, mind you, at this point my nipples were bloody, they were cracked, they were painful, like everything about my breasts was painful. So nursing in a dentist's office was still painful, and it was so painful, my nipples were so painful that I couldn't really tell if it had made a difference. The next day I was able to tell a difference. From then on, every single day, nursing got better and better and better. Latching didn't hurt anymore. Nursing was just like a suction feeling. It wasn't painful. I was so glad I did that procedure. I hated having to put my daughter through it, but I was so glad we did that procedure. Now, after we had that procedure done, we needed to do exercises with her. So we had to sweep underneath her upper lip and underneath her tongue 6 times a day or something like that, and we used like sterile gloves and whatnot to do that, just to avoid that it would grow back together. A week later we had the appointment and everything healed perfectly, and ever since then breastfeeding has been so easy. I now know why they say breastfeeding is not supposed to hurt. In the beginning I thought, okay, they mean like it's not supposed to be hurting so bad. No, like breastfeeding is not supposed to hurt. And now breastfeeding is something I love doing. I mean, before it was something that mattered to me and that was important to me and that I wanted to do. Now it's something that I truly love to do. I think it's the most beautiful thing I'm doing with my daughter. It gives me so much snuggle time with her. And we have been breastfeeding her on demand. So after, right the next day after the surgery, we didn't need to top up anymore because she was eating so much better. We had the nurse come out 2 days after to weigh her, and then we weighed her again. We were at the pediatrician's office the following Monday. She was weighed. Then again at the nursing clinic, she was weighed again, and she was consistently and steadily gaining weight. And she still is. We actually had she's now 6 weeks old. We had our pediatrician appointment today, and she's still gaining weight. So everything has worked out amazingly, and breastfeeding has just been going really well. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video and listen to my story. And that's my daughter. She's with Tim right now in the nursing chair right now, actually. Anyway, so I'm gonna be making a video on some breastfeeding essentials, like tools and like items that I've used to make breastfeeding more comfortable and enjoyable for me and for Clara. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.